Hi, and welcome to an episode of the JetRails podcast. I'm Robert, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about checkouts. Not the first time that we've tackled the topic, but I've got a guest here whose company has serviced and supported over 20,000 Magento sites. And so really, I think we're going to get to the heart of a lot of what it takes to really have a strong conversion rate, as well as some topics around other checkout related necessities like security. So with no further ado, Thien-Lan, would you do the honor of introducing yourself and OneStepCheckout?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Robert. Or Bobby. So I'm Thien-Lan Weber. And for those who don't know me, I'll explain a little bit what you see and what you hear, like an Asian lady with a strange Australian French accent. So I'll spend a bit of time on my background. I was born in Paris. My origins are Vietnamese. And so I was born and raised there, studied at a business school in Paris and started working at Accenture as a management consultant, focusing on retail and CPG. And then life led me to go to Australia. And there I decided that consulting wasn't for me. There wasn't enough action. So I went to marketing for a French cosmetic brand called Clarins, very, very well known. From there, I moved on to Johnson & Johnson, tier one, the biggest American company. And from there, that was a big turning point. I joined eBay in 2007. So from there, with eBay and working with PayPal, I learned a lot about digital e-commerce. And that's why I'm here today.
You know, that's interesting. You went from a lot of big companies. I mean, I would consider all of those, Accenture, Johnson & Johnson, eBay and PayPal. I mean, I don't know. I suppose everyone started somewhere, like, depending on, when you're a part of a certain team, it could have been a little smaller. But in general, you've now, with OneStepCheckout, you're really at a company that's really more hyper-focused on a particular problem and solving that problem for a particular market. What was that like, making that kind of a real career shift in terms of maybe having a bigger impact in a smaller pond, so to speak?
That change was brought by life. So as a family, we were in Australia and we thought we wanted to go back to Europe as we had small children. So we came back to Europe and my husband landed a job in Oslo. That's where I met OneStepCheckout. And I figured, that's an interesting way to stay in e-commerce, still work for a leader in their market, although it's a bit more niche, and to bring more capabilities in terms of communications and marketing.
Yeah. And so you've really, you're beyond a world traveler. You've settled down in lots of different places. Today, are you based in France again now? Is that where you call home?
So last year, exactly 12 months ago, we moved back to France for the first time in 16 years. And I've been working remotely since. But basically, OneStepCheckout was born global. So from day one, they had staff and customers all over the globe. So it didn't make any difference whether I was in France. That's a very, very, I was very fortunate. And it's interesting to see that even before the pandemic, remote work was widespread and very easy to manage. And I even gave a talk about that at Meet Magento New York in 2018 about the work balance. Lots of studies showed that people were motivated by better flexibility in terms of locations and hours, and that the productivity was even higher. Some companies tried work 4 days, paid 5, and they saw a jump in productivity.
Yes, I've been remote for about 3 years now, and I had a background of running a team of helping to run a business and having everyone on site, and I miss some of the interactions in person. But then again, I'm used to traveling to so many trade shows and visiting coworkers on site and doing other things that in a normal year, there's a lot of balance. And then this year, everyone's had my experience of being home. And, I know for some it's been challenging, but for so many, they see that the productivity of not having the commute time, of in some cases having more uninterrupted time, because there isn't, hopefully, I mean, depending, certainly a lot of us had kids home for periods of time and still do. But in general, less water cooler conversation, as we say, less stopping and chatting with people. And those conversations can be helpful and meaningful and impactful. But when you've got more than you can get done in the day, sometimes the balance is tough. So I find that's a really, really interesting balance. And so tell me a little bit more about OneStepCheckout. So it's a company that was founded in Norway and really focused. Obviously, the name, I love to ask about company names, but this one seems rather obvious and well chosen. And especially well chosen because, thinking about the history, to my knowledge, the company really still focuses on OneStepCheckout and hasn't particularly branched into other things, has decided to be masters of that domain, really to focus the expertise and not to be developing a million things at a time. What does the company look like in that sense? Was it really born out of necessity, or was it just an idea that someone was hoping would take off, and they've really just kept at it?
So the company started in 2010 when the two co-founders, so one was a tech whiz and the other one was a fearless sales guy, they started shipping Magento 1 stores. And one client called them up and said, "Hey, your store is really broken. How do you expect my customers to go through 6 pages of checkout, asking them all these informations? It's not going to work." So those two guys thought, that's interesting. And if this client is asking for it, chances are all the other Magento 1 clients will ask for it. And it was a great bet because then at the heyday, there were over 250,000 installations. So they thought, let's solve it for this one and for everyone else. And let's focus on one thing, but do it really well. And they picked that one because checkout is the most critical area of any online business. You can get as much traffic as you want, get people to buy, upsell, cross-sell. But if they don't check out and don't place the order, you lose all those efforts. So they knew there was something there, that the market really needed it. And so they developed something that was solid enough to cater to everyone's needs. And then it was a virtuous circle because across all regions, customers were like, in my region, I need the house number to be separated. In my region, I need this. In my business, I need this type of payment method. So we can say the solution was stress tested by thousands of different use cases, and we were able to solve, almost all of it.
That's interesting. So an earlier player in this market, starting it in 2010 and coming from merchant demand. So not just an idea, but, something that was being asked for in market. And, fast forwarding to today, I know the stat from your website and your marketing materials that 20,000 plus Magento merchants, have purchased and utilized the extension. I know that there's a version for Magento 1 and a version for Magento 2. About how many merchants do you think are actively using the OneStepCheckout system today between those two platforms?
So, what we can see is a number of orders. So we are approaching 25,000 and over 1,000 of them are Magento 2. Now, we don't know who is live because we made a business and technical decision not to call home. So we don't know at any point in time who is live, and we don't know how much merchants are processing in terms of transaction volume. So we can't figure out how many are live, but what we can say is that Interestingly enough, we also have lots of what we call pirates. So it's stores out there who have an extension but have never paid for it. So they got it, in a legal way, and there are a lot of them out there. So there are probably more stores live with OneStepCheckout than we would think.
Shame on them for stealing from a small business. I mean, I say it with a little bit of jest, but no, really. Pirating is a real thing. There's open source code out there for all of us, and that's great. But there are times when a business is counting on people to do the right thing. So about 1,000 on M2. That's interesting. Would you say that that's been really picking up pace in the last few months? I'll say that from the web hosting standpoint. I was just talking about on another taping this week how, at the beginning of this year of 2020, we still had a lot of Magento 1 users, and we had a lot of folks coming over for our Magento 1 end of life security packages around the web hosting layers and web application firewalling, malware scanning, intrusion detection, all the things that we do in our partnerships around security with companies like Mage1 and Sansec and Sakuri, Cloudflare. And now that I'm looking back at the data, it looks like we've really dwindled that down to a fraction of our user base. That a large percentage, these are mainly mid-market and enterprise users, but they have made the upgrade to Magento 2. And so we know that there's still a lot of Magento 1 sites out there. There's really good data to support that. But the velocity, of course, now really seems to be around Magento 2, that anyone that's doing serious work by the volume is choosing to do it on M2. Are you seeing a similar trend line?
Yeah. So, what was interesting is that in 2020, we still had a couple of Magento 1 orders every week. And then starting from July, it really stopped. And that's where Magento 2 picked up big time with big enterprise clients, mid-market. But we still have questions from Magento 1 clients who are adding domains, getting licenses for more stores. So that's quite interesting. And that's why we keep supporting our M1 customers. We did a survey back in 2018, and 30% of them said they would stay on M1 in the medium term. Mm-hmm. So
we still have some really large merchants on M1, including folks on Magento Enterprise, Magento Commerce. So it's not unusual that there are teams that are still engineering their next site, or there's still some that haven't even broken ground on their next site. And, we're, I think as a community here to support them, I know as a community here to support them. But, like you say, that some of them are continuing to move forward with what they have, and they're not just sitting on their hands idly, not maintaining and trying to grow. But that's interesting that you're seeing folks still spinning up M1 and still leveraging fresh sites. I would imagine that with all of the Magento 1 extensions removed from the Magento marketplace, it's probably a little harder for people to find extensions like yours for Magento 1 specifically. Maybe they could search for something, and if it's available for Magento 2, they could go back to your website and see if you're still offering it for M1. But I think that, to the best of my knowledge, there's now no central repository, no directory to go search M1 extensions. And that probably makes it a little bit harder for these users to find good tech to add, that they have to go on their experience and the experience of others in the community, which is vast. But would you say that that's probably pretty accurate, that that in essence, a lot of the users, they're people that were already familiar with the product?
Yes. So we established a very strong brand awareness. So we sell most of our licenses on search, and on M1 we were definitely very, very popular. probably more popular than any other Magento extensions. So they wouldn't have a problem finding us or thinking about us. But also we did a lot of communications because it's important for our M1 merchant to feel that even if Adobe doesn't support M1 anymore, they can still have a safe and secure checkout. They don't want to have attacks and stuff like that. So we are working very closely with members of the community like Mage1, OpenMage, Sansec, and yourself to make sure that if they choose to stay on M1 a little bit longer, they can still have a performing checkout that is safe and secure.
I can say that we're thankful for working with great companies. And, it was one of the things that really stood out to us about OneStepCheckout, the fact that we're working with a lot of the same security experts in the Magento community, and that we're all working toward the same ends, keeping merchants safe. I know that there was recently that card bleed attack that hit a few thousand Magento 1 sites. It seems that, JetRails customers were protected and remain safe. We'll remain vigilant. We know that web hosting played a big role in that one, the server configurations and access rules and things. And so, it's important, I think, for all of us that touch the checkout or touch these sites to really be banded together and really focused on the same goals. And when there is a 0 day, and in this case, again, some networks like JetRails were better protected than others that don't have the same security apparatus. But I think that it's just as important that we all rise to the occasion to put out updates and to lock things down and to protect the users as quickly as possible. There's a difference between having a security incident and having a security incident that lingers. Catching it as it's happening. If you catch the thieves, before they really get away with anything, then you're, yes, it's a headache, but it's not nearly as damaging. So certainly very important. And I'm going to ask about a different stat that I pulled from your site. Your site mentions about $8 billion in annual transactions. Particularly that's an interesting figure. First, I'll ask, because you mentioned that there is no call home feature in your extension. So how does your company come to figures like that? How do you compute that kind of data?
So we extrapolate based on insight we get from our customers. So back then it was 20,000 customers, and the hypothesis is that they were making 400,000 a year. So you do the math, and that's how you get your 8 billion. But yeah, we don't have a way to track that.
I think 400,000 is a pretty fair baseline. I mean, considering that there are some stores that probably were petering out and weren't really producing, but for most people to maintain their Magento 1 site properly or Magento 2 site properly, they have to have a real revenue. It is software that really does cater more toward established business. We have users doing hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not, in some cases, perhaps billions in revenue through the platform. So, I think that it certainly could average out pretty easily. So that makes sense. This is an interesting year where I think just about every major category, every major industry or vertical in e-commerce has seen lift at one point or another. And for a lot of categories, that's been sustained. Certainly, there are some businesses that are hurting more because people aren't gathering and aren't using certain products that they would normally for gathering and group events and activities. But would you say that perhaps that number, if you were to do the math again for 2020, that it would be a little bit different just based upon the year that e-commerce is having?
E-commerce grew at a massive pace. And according to Adobe's report, it would have taken 4 to 6 years to reach those levels. So definitely a big boost this year. And it's happening in all the markets where we have a big presence. So the US, the UK, the Netherlands. And there's no reason why it wouldn't have impacted those with one-step checkout. Even better, I think those with one-step checkout would have converted more of that influx of traffic than their competitors. And it's quite good because, and imagine if they use JetRails and have even better performance and speed, we know that is a big factor for conversion. So with that, it's much easier for them to beat the market and go faster than the market.
Yeah, we like to look at a lot of data points when it comes to the loading speed, because we can deal with content delivery networks and Varnish and Redis and other caching, and we can handle all of the the hardware and cloud provisioning to really use best in class technology, and the configurations and optimizations around everything, and all sorts of other layers that are going to have a deep impact on time to first byte and overall loading speed. But as a web host, we don't control the application itself. And so there are inherently going to be bottlenecks and challenges when it comes to the Magento software, when it comes to callbacks to third parties, things that are loading from external servers, and so it absolutely makes a difference having the right systems. Magento 2 natively moved to an optional two-step checkout. And I think, when I first read that was happening, I thought that might solve that pain point of, the old 5-step checkout. But in so many ways, that native checkout doesn't really optimize the way that a shopper would appreciate. That if you were to actually look at the checklist of things that like one-step checkout does to enhance the checkout, it's a little bit night and day for the experience. And because we all know that when it comes to seconds in that checkout, you can easily lose the shopper.
I'm glad you're asking that, because that's the big elephant in the room. Like with Magento 2, shortening the checkout to only 2 steps. Why do we need a one-step checkout? And we just made a video around that because we found a study over 5,000 online shoppers, asking them why would they abandon at checkout. And what they say is one of the reasons is registration. So when you come to a site and you place all these items in your cart, and then they say, oh, you need to register, then you lose a lot of people. So the registration mode is a big challenge. On the one hand, merchants want to get customers, not just orders. So they want an email address. Marketers want an email address and all those sorts of information so they can market to them. But at the same time, would you rather have less customers with all that data, or do you want to have maximum customers? So registration is one of the big challenges. And I want to say we solve that by allowing various ways customers can register. And the best one, the one that is utilized the most and have been asked by customers, is a seamless checkbox. So when you enter your shipping details, you enter your email address, and then you can simply tick a box where it expands and you can add a password. So just one additional line, and then you put your address and so on. So it's very quick and easy, very natural in flow, and that allows customers to register. So that's one of the main reasons why they abandon at checkout. The other one is not being able to see order totals at upfront. So in the default Magento 2 checkout, they enter your shipping address, shipping method, and then it calculates. And then you see your order total in the next page. You choose a payment method.
I hate clicking next after I enter my personal information in order to see totals. It's a personal pet peeve of mine, because I know that it's not required in order to get to that point. But at that point, I'm giving up my personal identifying data, and it's really not a comfort zone that I've definitely had websites that I've shopped on that I moved on from because it just wasn't something that, I guess maybe because I'm in the industry, I might take it a little bit differently. Like, no, thank you. Like, if you guys can't do this right, I can't help you here. I'm going to the next website. Maybe I'm a little extreme, but.
And you don't want surprises when you think you're going to pay, let's say, $50, and you say, "Oh, I've got a coupon code, so I'm sure it's going to be 40, and that's my limit." And then you see additional sales taxes, and because they're shipping to a different address, it's going to be more. All those things that you can't see upfront is very frustrating.
Well, and I think it really depends in some cases who you're shopping with. If you're buying from Apple, well, you know who they are, and you know what you're getting, and you're going to do what you have to do to get through the checkout. I say the same with branding, that, when you get to Apple's website, they don't have to tell you much about their story as a company. You know who they are. They've already convinced you that they're a leading brand in the universe. That's not how most e-commerce sites are intended to operate. You have to instill trust. You have to make people comfortable. You have to cater to them, and you have to get rid of roadblocks and get them through the process as quickly as possible. And so, there are differences in how some companies can operate. I know that both of our teams work with some really large merchants that deal with the same problems. That just because they're large companies, perhaps they're really big in brick and mortar and retail, and for their online websites, they're working just as hard to make sure that someone buys it from them, as opposed to going to Amazon and searching and getting whatever they find, or whether it's from their brand or some knockoff or who knows, or they want to capture the sale in the moment. So
exactly,
just as important. And I pulled a lot of stats from your site before this, so apologies in advance. But I tried to do my homework, right? Your site does prominently advertise that you have in-house support team members. With a good amount of sites now moving to Magento 2, has your team seen support backlogs and response times impacted? Has that caused any bumps in the road in terms of your operations?
So I have to be very honest. I'll be very honest here. Back in 2017, when we first launched OneStepCheckout for Magento 2, it was hard. It was really hard. The platform was unstable. There were issues everywhere. So it was really complex, and we wanted to do the right thing. So not reverse engineer from Magento 1. We really wanted to follow the philosophy of Magento 2 and allow merchants for scalability and modularity. So our vision is that OneStepCheckout could be compatible with any payment methods, shipping methods that they want to implement, and any third-party extension that follows the Magento 2 coding standards. But those standards were quite demanding, and it wasn't easy for everyone to follow them. So that was the real challenge. So then the good thing of so our business model is that our support team is the same people who develop the product. So when someone asks a question, they don't get first line support saying, "Oh, we got your request and we'll send it to the experts." They get the expert directly. So it could take a little bit of time for the expert to respond, but when they respond, they come back with a solution. So
I love that model. Some describe it as having to eat your own dog food. That you develop this, now you know it best, and you really are in the best position to improve it in a lot of ways. From our side, we have a few Magento extensions that we make available, some publicly and some to clients. So we have Cloudflare extensions for Magento 1 and Magento 2 that pull Cloudflare settings and resources right into the Magento admin, so you don't need to be logged in somewhere else. It'll, does the work through the APIs. Very convenient. And we do, from time to time, get developers reaching out with inquiries, and we pull, right in the developer of the extension, really great member of our team. And the same with our two-factor authentication extension for Magento 1, which is just an extra security layer, or our Varnish extension for Magento 2, which is really meant for clients, to really enhance the experience as they're using Varnish with their M2 sites. But I think that there's something to be said for that there are, if you were to go through the Magento marketplace, a good number of extensions that integrate third parties and add features and do things that are made by third party companies that aren't made by the company whose technology is being integrated. And I think that inherently leads to challenges in a lot of cases with long-term updates and patching and upgrades, that it's not always a match made in heaven to go that route.
Yeah. So we also gather a lot of insight from our customers, so we can prioritize our roadmap. If we say that, the majority of customers have that issue. So recently, the big issue we had, and I'm sorry for customers who had to wait a little bit longer to get that solved. It was issues with payment methods like Braintree, Amazon Pay. So it took a little bit longer for our support team to fix, but then they released a new version with all the fixes, and it makes in one hit you make 20 people happy.
Well, there's a lot of flux in the market around that. We've had episodes of this podcast where we've talked about the deprecation of certain payment methods from the Magento core, and why some of that's happening around new security standards from the payment card industry, from different regions of the world and governing bodies, especially around Europe. And so it's understandable that in some cases there's going to be some time to deal with that en masse as all of these different payment gateways are updating their integrations for platforms like Magento and such. But I can understand, I'm sure, some users out there that felt the wait time that sometimes days can feel like years. So that's for sure. And I do imagine that the product does keep evolving in a pretty healthy way. So you mentioned the roadmap. Do you find that pretty much every year, aside from just making your OneStepCheckout compatible with other companies' extensions and with Magento core updates and other security and standards that are happening in the market, that you're able to find additional improvements based upon how technology is progressing and what users are looking for?
Definitely. So we gather requirements in terms of new features as well. And we're quite happy to say that a couple of months ago, we released a new feature where you can update your quantities directly at checkout. So that's quite important because from a user experience perspective, often, that happens to me a lot, websites are a bit slow. So you think you've added it to your cart. No, you don't think you've added to your cart, but you have. So you click again, and then you add 2, and then you go to checkout, and you're like, oh no, I don't want to buy 2 of them, only 1. So
that's not as uncommon as some people would think. Especially as you do the math, as you've added different things. Yeah, no, I don't really need 4 of those today. I'll just take 2, and I'll order again in a couple of weeks, or whatever it may be. That I think I tend to do that this year just because I don't want to make myself sound like a hoarder, but 2 kids at home, including one that's an infant, and you find yourself ordering diapers, formula, and all sorts of things. And you want to be stocked up. You don't want to have to run out to the store, unnecessarily. But at the same time, how much do you really want to stock up on some items? It seems a little bit, a little bit too much in some cases. So I've found myself this year more than I think ever grappling at checkout, and especially in South Florida where we've had various hurricanes passing by, and we've been very lucky where I'm at, but in general, not a good hurricane year for the Gulf Coast and such, for sure. And so you want to be prepared, and I think that leads to a lot more jostling at the last minute for, okay, well, now this is probably a little too much. Let's come back to something a little bit more normal. Let's not be a real hoarder about this. Uh, you know, uh, I do think it's interesting, though, that your extension is only working with Magento 1 and 2, that's really where your team has focused. You're really banking on the future of Magento. Has there been any plan to support other platforms, or have you really decided to double down on this community?
So we've been asked by other to develop an extension for other platforms, but the market is not favorable. Either it's too early or it's not big enough. For now, we still have a lot to do on Magento, especially with our big Magento 1 base. We don't want them to stay on Magento 1 forever. Our mission is to help Adobe and the whole community get them to Magento 2 in the smoothest way. And we don't want them to leave the platform. So that's why we've been gathering a lot of tips from our agencies to help them get some learnings and insight on how to plan for a smooth migration. And so that's what we've been looking at as well.
Yeah, my personal thought has always been that there are going to be different platforms that are best for different users, but merchants shouldn't have to jump around because they don't have the right web development team helping to build and maintain their site, because they don't have the right web hosting support to tailor and customize around their needs, and maintain and monitor and manage and be proactive for them. They shouldn't have to chase a different tech stack for technology. I mean, Magento is really as robust as it's going to get for these merchants, as flexible and as powerful as it's going to get. So, if there are merchants that are retracting, or that really, they're very simplified business to consumer needs, small business, I could see why they're going to shop around. For a lot of these more established and growing merchants, we just like to make sure that they've got the resource that they need. That we hear, I think more than ever, we've been seeing folks try out different clouds this year. I'd say for the last 2 years. And it's been one of the top reasons that we've run into that they wind up migrating, because they have a bad experience, because they don't have the right support and the right partners involved. And we've seen the same, of course, throughout the totality of the Magento experience, that like any site, it doesn't matter what platform. If you have developers that don't know the platform well, that don't, have good coding standards in place, and best practices, and QA, quality assurance, for testing and such, to make sure that what they're delivering for you is really good. Of course, the grass is always going to be greener on the other side. Then that you're just going to feel like you got the raw end of that deal. And you're going to move over. And so, speak about standards and things like that. Your team is a part of the Extension Development Network, ExtDN. Has that been helpful? Is it still active? Has that helped to set certain standards and keep certain alignment within the community to make sure that extension development teams are sharing knowledge and best practice, and helping the community as more of a cohesive part of the ecosystem?
Yes. So I'd like to share the story of how it all came about, because it's a great story, putting highlights on the power of the community and all the events. So it all happened that imagine 2018. I signed up to the Big Dam Run, the one organized by Brett.
Sure, we were sponsoring this year, and of course, Magento Imagine wound up being canceled. But I would like to have run into you again there.
There you go. So so I signed up, and I booked a seat to get on the bus to get to the dam. And it happens that I sat next to Christophe Ringleff, the founder of Fuman. And so we started chatting, and we had so many values in common for our extension business. It was a great chat. So on the way back, we came back by car with other members of ExtDN, and really it was we could see we were really aligned. So next thing we know, we get an invitation to join ExtDN. And at the end of the year, it was time for the yearly board election. And they kindly invited me to become a member of the board. So I was very flattered and thought, it also makes sense in a way because I'm adding a different perspective, perhaps a little bit less technical, but more business oriented. And indeed, I helped the organization get a bit more visibility. So what was quite good is that the following year we had a lot of traction because we participated to many in-person events, all the big Magento events. So we were able to hand out flyers like this one. So that's quite good. So
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, so we had flyers for developers with do and don'ts on developing quality extensions, but also for merchants and agencies to say, this is what you should do and not do when you are choosing an extension, because a poorly coded extension might be cheaper firsthand, but then you'll spend so many more hours fixing issues and not having updates and things like that.
Mm-hmm. We tell that to a lot of people about shared hosting environments with Magento too, and the same really applies with M1. But when it's not really optimized and configured and tailored for you and secured for you, and in terms of loading speed, in terms of a lot of the issues that users have, in terms of support, in most cases, in life in general, you get what you pay for. And what could you do with with faster support that was more responsive and more proactive, and without having to go through round after round trying to resolve the same issue? And what could you do with something that was really catering to your needs better? It's a very common conversation in the market. I think the same applies to a lot of things. You can, whatever money you want to spend for web development, I think you can find someone that will meet you there. You won't necessarily be happy with the results. So I think at every step of the journey, it's really about finding that happy medium of not what's the cheapest thing, but what's going to bring the most long-term value. What's going to deliver, in web hosting, we look at scalability and stability and reliability of the sites, and aside from speed and security, and it's and just the amount of work to get through support requests and such as needed. It's so different than just focusing on it as a commodity, as well. What's the cheapest? That's often not going to be the cheapest in the long run. So exactly. I would say the same with something like a OneStepCheckout. If you just go and grab the cheapest thing, it's probably going to have more code conflicts with different extensions that you're already running. It may not be as well maintained long-term as Magento versions are updated. There's ups and downs, to going with something that's, it may not be as robust and as valuable in terms of how it impacts your conversion rate. There's a lot that happens in that regard. That's interesting. I miss seeing people like Christoph at events like Magento Imagine, though, and you get me thinking about a lot of those folks. Just seeing flyers and things from these trade shows. So much information that we've all gained by participating. I know that Meet Magento New York is coming up, and I'll be participating virtually. And there's been, you and I actually met at a Magento Association virtual conference, virtual meetup. So, I think we're all doing our best this year to take advantage of what we can to really network and stay on top of what's going on out there.
Exactly. So that was our challenge. And I guess that's why you're asking the question, is it still active? So for the last, 9 months, we haven't been very present as ExtDN because there were no in-person events. So we thought, what can we do to come back in front of everyone? And so today, I'm very happy to say that we just published a blog releasing a set of tools. So last year, with those flyers that you can find at extdn.org/resource, you see the do and don'ts of how to code an extension. But this year, with these tools, we're not just telling you what to do. We help you check, test, and stress test your code. So very, very excited to say it was released this morning, and hopefully we'll be able to announce it at Meet Magento New York at the end of the month. So and why did we pick Meet Magento New York? Not only the time, but also we particularly like their focus on diversity and inclusion. Marsha is doing a lot of efforts to get more first-time speakers, female speakers. And at ExtDN, we recently had a new female member joining, Sveta from NextBS. And we hope she will get the opportunity to talk more about those tools at Meet Magento New York.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I've been to that event multiple times in person, and I can speak to a lot of the quality there that I would certainly have been going in person if it was in person. And I'm glad to be attending virtually. That Marsha and team certainly worked very hard to make that event the success that it is. So, and speaking of JavaScript and other things, it sounds like there's a good speaker lined up around that. When it comes to progressive web apps, PWA technology, I know that Magento has certainly been progressing their PWA Studio. I think we're at version 7 point something now, and there are other PWA front ends being leveraged. It's maybe not consistently getting used, but it certainly continued to be important in the community in terms of delivering fast and very user-friendly front-end experiences. Has that posed any challenges for your team, who provides a piece of technology that's really focused on one component of that customer experience on the checkout? Have there been requests and issues with being able to deliver your technology for that particular audience?
Yeah, so PWA is very, very trendy. And over the last few years, all the various players and standards have been reaching out to us. What we see today is the market it's still very early days for us to, figure out how to best create something for PWA. But we're quite lucky that we are part of ExtDN, and there are some members like DC Ritzma who are at the forefront of PWA. So we gather a lot of insights from agencies. Personally, we haven't received many inquiries from our own customers, merchants. But collaboratively with ExtDN, we are definitely listening closely to what customers have to say to best serve that market.
And speaking of the evolution of the market, any spoilers, any new features coming out that you can share? Anything particularly interesting in the roadmap?
So with Magento 2, we are making it a point to have new releases at least 4 times a year. So there will be new features, fixes, things like that. About the market, what I didn't say as well is, the $8 billion processed when we had a majority of M1. I think that's going to increase even though there are less Magento 2 installations. So if you want to see the number of installations, there's very good source of data by Sansec. So I think it's sansec.com/Magento data usage. And it's updated daily, and you can see the number of M1 installations and M2 installations. Mm-hmm. So there are probably 40,000 Magento installations, but what we see is that customers are much bigger. So as an example, if I take a couple of US-based companies who are clients of us, there's Helen of Troy, Hot Tools. So they are making, hair dryers and curlers and appliances. And they make, looked it up, I think they maybe 1.5 billion in sales. So even if, a third is online, it's still big. Another one is Zag. So it's also listed on the NASDAQ, and they're making 500 million. So, you are not with the 400,000 average sales per year, but it's 10 times, 100 times bigger.
It's particularly, always interesting to see these really big companies, big brands. In some cases, companies that own multiple brands, like Helen of Troy, engaged in that way. And it's easy to forget, when you think about something like hair dryers, just how many could really be sold. So many thoughts. What I'm going to do is definitely share a bunch of links in the description of the episode. So anyone that's tuning in, whether through the podcast or through the video of this recording, you'll be able to access in the show description for the episode links for all sorts of things that we've been talking about today. As we start to wrap up, Thien-Lan, you've been really generous with your time today. Any final thoughts? Anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners before we end for the day?
So as you said, I really want to thank Magento Association, now known as Magento Force, because thanks to the online event, so we got to meet. And I want to go back to that experience. So it was to hop in, and there was a networking button, like a blue button. So on your side, you clicked and I clicked, and after 5 seconds, boom, they matched us. And so it was a bit like chat roulette, and I thought it was very engaging, a lot of fun, and that allowed us to start partnering, and we'll do lots of stuff together and partner to make to provide more value to Magento merchants. So that's the beauty of the Magento Association. Thank you.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself. The digital business networking equivalent of speed dating turned out to work extremely well and to provide, real results, I think, for the community. I'm sure not just for our companies, but sometimes all that it takes is a few minutes of connecting in order to find the common ground where you can solve problems together and be supportive as part of a larger community. I've used that word a lot in today's episode, and I don't feel bad about it. So I'm certainly just as grateful for that experience. Thien-Lan, thank you so much for joining today and for sharing that background. Yeah, absolutely. And we hope to have you back sometime soon.
Definitely. See you soon.
Happy selling, everyone. Hey, listeners, are you still there? Because I have a treat for you. When we taped this episode, I was home in South Florida, and Thien-Lan was home in France. And somewhere in between our internet providers and Zoom and pandemic-level usage of the internet, there were a few choppy spots. The raw footage was worse, trust me. So Thien-Lan and I thought you'd enjoy this blooper. For those listening to the audio version of this episode, you're just going to have to picture a very nerdy podcast host that probably shouldn't quit his day job for a life as a comedian or a sculptor. With no further ado, enjoy.
You still there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Did it break up
I thought you were frozen.
If you're seeing me freeze, chances are I'm seeing you have that.
No, I don't think you were frozen. I think you were just not moving at all.
Just not move. Oh, I'm pretty good at statue impersonation. Especially in Paris, I could just stand out that. At some point, I'd get a few euro, but someone would take pity on me. Just leave a hat on the floor, maybe a briefcase. Yeah, my humor gets no better from here. Feel bad for my children.
That's how they learn, right? What to do, what not to do.